Hello, hello. What is up, everybody? This is Marshall Couture, also known as Marsh Makes Comics. And today we got Peter Simeti of Alterna Comics here. And we're going to be talking about single vision versus collaborative comics. How you doing, Peter?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime. I was looking at the my old videos and everything, and I'm like, because I thought for some reason I was like, oh, I told Peter that we're going to talk about this topic, and I'm like, wait a minute, have I talked about this topic with Peter before already? So I looked back and I was like, nope, we haven't. For one, that's good, and number two, you've been on my channel five. This is the fifth time.
No way. Nice.
Yeah,
Do I get like a cool jacket or something for that?
you should, man. I should send you some kind of jacket. It might not be like really awesome. It might be old and used, but
Five Timers Club. I get like a sticker or a patch or something.
yeah, yeah,
All
totally.
right. Well, it's always a pleasure, man. Always good
Yeah,
talking to you.
absolutely. Always fun. And today we got, well, first of all, let me just ask. Yeah, I mean, I think people who watch my channel know who you are because I always talk very nicely about Alterna Comics and Peter Simeti because I love what you do. But if anybody does not know um, who you are and what you do, let them know right now. And before you do that, do you still hear an echo? Because I hear a slight echo.
Oh, you do? No, I don't hear any echo.
Okay. Everybody in the chat, let me know if you're hearing an echo. I'll try to change that. But if you're not, my echo isn't that bad, so it should be
Okay.
all good. Um, so yeah, let everybody know who you are, what you do, man.
Sure. I'm the founder publisher of Alterna Comics. We've been around for 17 years, and I've written and created and lettered books like The Chair, which is a death row psychological horror. It got turned into a film in 2015, 2016, something like that. And then we've had a New York Times bestseller back in 2012, which was Fubar, Volume 2, Empire of the Rising Dead. It was kind of like a World War II zombie book. And now I'm currently, finally, writing an ongoing series, something that really, really, really means a lot to me. It's everything I love about comics, horror, sci-fi, supernatural, all of that. It's King Cryptid, and we got the first 4 issues out, and we're funding the next 5 issues, issues 5 to 9, currently on Indiegogo and on AlternaComics.com. But yeah, it's been great, man. To get back into the creative zone again. I was doing like some short story stuff and whatnot. I've always been drawing, not necessarily interiors or anything like that, but sketch cards, covers, and things. But to get back into writing, especially to creating a series and really building that up, it's been great. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. I recently did a live stream, and I was talking about how comics can actually be a great joy to create. Like, it is hard. There's a struggle to it. There's many things to learn and many disciplines to master. But at the same time, like, even when I'm lettering a comic, or even when I'm, doing like thumbnails or certain different things that you would think maybe are more arduous or less fun, um, every step brings you closer and closer to a finished comic. And I actually can find, and if I'm not rushing and I'm not like have some kind of situation where I'm like worrying, I actually enjoy the process, even with the stuff that's not the most what you would think of as the most fun.
Yeah, it's the problem solving part of it that's fun too, because you get to be creative, and you get to kind of have exactly what you want to talk about tonight, which is that collaboration.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
really, everyone, as long as you've got your head screwed on right and your heart in the right place about what you're trying to accomplish, which is to make the best story possible, it's a very fun experience. So as long as you could put the ego aside a bit, even
Yeah.
though sometimes that's tough to do.
Mhm.
But as long as you can really manage to do that and worry about what makes the best thing for the story, the character development, the plot, all those aspects, the design, the story, the writing, the art, the lettering, every single aspect of it, it's so much fun. And it's very rewarding once you get those stories out there and you share them with the people of the world. And there's nothing like it, man. There's nothing like it. There's been days where I've had I've had moments where I'm like, oh boy, this is tough. And
Yeah,
then,
for sure.
like clockwork, every time that happens, I get a wonderful message, an email, a tweet, a DM, whatever it may be, some kind of correspondence where someone is talking about how much the books mean to them, almost as if they knew, as if my plead was reaching across the cosmos, and they send me in a nice, lovely letter, and it gives me that fuel to kind of put the bad thoughts away, because it's
Mhm.
all worth it when people really enjoy this stuff, and not just enjoy it, but I've received some unbelievably heartfelt messages about not just my books, but a bunch of the books at Alterna, and how much these comics have meant to them, and that kind of stuff is incredible. So it really makes me remember why this is important, and that this transcends just being creative and expressing a story you want to get out there. It means something to people, which is great.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's awesome, and it's great when you get that feedback. I get that feedback a lot from the YouTube channel. I want to get to the point where I start getting that feedback more for my comics, but it'll come.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. We all do something that if we put ourselves out there in a genuine way, we get that kind of feedback.
Hmm.
So even you, I know you want to get that feedback from your comics, and it will come. You'll get that. But you doing these kinds of things, these videos, and some of them are unbelievably insightful and helpful to people, and it touches them. It means something. It adds value to their life, and
Hmm.
that's something people remember, and they look back fondly, and you kind of continue that positivity out there, and then it makes them want to be creative, and that's great.
Yeah.
So I think everybody that is genuinely approaching anything in this kind of a way is really making a positive impact, which is, I mean, that's some of the most important stuff that you could do with your life. So,
Hmm.
kudos to you. Don't ever think, well, is it anything? It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it is. I do I do enjoy the processes of doing the YouTube and stuff just as much as well. So speaking about the YouTube, we do have people hanging out here. What Geeks Do Network. I'm ready,
Hey,
y'all. Thanks for coming by. Um, Levy Skeen, hello, hello. Thank you for coming by. I have a feeling that we got some people from your crowd because I don't recognize some of these people.
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
cool.
good dudes. Yeah, we got Levi in there. We got Yan Zhao, Randy. Man,
Hmm.
very nice.
What's
Hey,
up?
Devante, what's up?
Hello, hello. Thank you, Randy. Thank you for coming in. And always, Devante is one of the people who's often here. Thank you for coming by,
Nice.
man. So, yeah. So, anybody else who, if you have any thoughts, comments, questions as we're talking about this topic and wherever else we wander, let us know if you have any questions specifically, about Peter Simeti and his the Alterna Comics or King Cryptid. Let us know. There is a link in the description for the Indiegogo for King Cryptid at
Oh,
the moment.
thank you.
Actually, you know what? There isn't yet, but now there is. I forgot to press save.
Yeah,
Um,
you can make it easy on your kingcryptid.com will take you to the Indiegogo, and alternacomics.com/kingcryptid will take you there if you want to support directly on the Alterna site. But either one's fine, whatever you
uh,
prefer.
awesome. Yeah. And like I said, I also have a link for Alterna Comics there. And I'm gonna throw the link in the description as in the chat as well for the Indiegogo because we gotta get some more people checking out that awesome book.
Thank you, man.
Um,
Yeah, and here's the
so
first four, just showing these up for a second. The first
yeah,
four are
yeah,
already out, so you can get these either on the Indiegogo or on alternacomics.com. I know Marsh got the first 4, and then
Yeah.
you just got the next 5 last night. So thank you, man.
Yes. Yes, of course I had to. So you started off with 4 at first, and now you're hitting us with 5 at a time. So that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, and the
glad we'll get more.
campaign with your help and the help of 685 other people over the course of the way hit 27,000 last night.
Wow.
So thank you guys so much. If we are lucky enough, fortunate enough to reach 50,000, we'll have 5 issues again on the next campaign. Next campaign so far will be 4 issues, and the reason for that being is that issue 10 is going to be king sized. So
Ooh.
issue 10 is going to be like a 64 pager.
Nice.
But if we reach 50 on this campaign, it'll give us enough wiggle room to get a head start and do 5 issues. But so far, next year on the campaign, no matter what, is 10, 11, 12, 13. So we
Awesome.
might do 14 again if we can raise what we got to raise. But I got a lot of stories to tell. And King Cryptid's already got about 40 issues or so mapped out. And I've got story ideas for about 100. So primarily the whole focus behind them is building up not just the world, because world building can end up becoming something where you are stalling plot development.
Hmm.
You keep building the world, you keep adding more characters, nothing really happens. King Cryptid's not like that. Every issue something happens. It's a ongoing episodic series, so every issue is a complete story in and of itself. You can jump in at issue 60 down the line or issue number 1, and you won't be lost. You're going to enjoy the story before you. You're going to get who the characters are and what they're about.
Hmm.
But the reason being that I'm telling the story like this is because it enables me to build up continuity along the way and have characters come back and have things that matter. So it's not that the issues are so self-contained that every character feels like they've got some kind of short-term memory loss. Things matter, they carry over. There's plot elements throughout. There's an overarching subplot. But every issue, you're not going to feel like, I feel like I'm in the middle of something here, and it just doesn't make sense. And I find that a lot of modern comics nowadays tend to go that route when it comes to the ongoing series. So King Crypt is not like that. It's if I had to really compare it for people who maybe are not familiar with that kind of comic book writing, I'd have to say something like Batman the Animated Series. A lot
Hmm.
of TV shows used to really be great at episodic format in general, not just animated shows. But it's got that feel. You could jump in on Batman the Animated Series, like whatever episode. Pretty much doesn't matter. You're going to be able to get a whole story and not feel lost. You're never going to question, who's this Batman fella? Is he good? Is he bad? That kind of a thing. So with King Crypt, it's the same thing. You're never going to question, like, is he good? Is he bad? What's he about? But there's a lot of other characters that are in it where we develop them further, and they'll come back and we'll see them again. And it'll be fun to see the interactions play out with them. But it's a monster mystery cover up conspiracy supernatural adventure series. So there's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to the development of the characters and everything because, I read the first 4 and, I feel like that's kind of wetting the whistle. It's like we're revving up and stuff. And I feel like there's a lot more character building on, for King Cryptid and the rest of the cast that I'm looking forward to get to know. So, I'm looking forward to that. And what Geeks Do Network says, is there any plans in the future for King Cryptid to be printed in a graphic novel format?
Yeah. But so it's going to be different than anything that's currently out in terms of the format and the approach for that. And
Hmm.
if someone's trade waiting, they're going to wait a long time on King Cryptid. They're going to wait 10 years. I'm
Oh,
not
wow.
putting out a trade until we hit the 10th anniversary.
Wow.
So these books came out in 2022. I want to make sure my memory's correct. It's not 2023. These issues came out. So earlier this year. I can't
Yeah.
believe earlier this year. Where's this year gone, Marsh? So in 2033, 10 years from now, we're going to have a trade come out featuring the top 5 stories as voted on by the readers. And the way that's going to work, whatever we have going on at that time, for me to communicate with you, whether that's a newsletter, whether that's some kind of social media, whatever it is, we're going to put a poll out there. There's going to be about 50 or so issues available to pick from, and the readers are going to let me know what were their top 5 favorites. And then those will be get put together as a trade, as a King Cryptid Essentials. And even, letting people know these were voted on by the King Cryptid readers themselves. And the reason for that, again, is because of the fact that the series isn't really something where there's a big story arc to put together as a trade. So the first 4 issues are not a story arc. Issue 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all separate kinds of stories. Over time, we'll be able to have things where certain characters I can compile as a trade. So the Behemoth will have a bunch of stories. Granite Beast will have a bunch of stories within the series. And we can have that kind of a trade featuring them. But it's not really one of those series where someone can wait, get 4 or 5 issues, and feel like that made sense to put it as a trade. And again, that's also a comment on the fact that everything nowadays seems to go to a trade. This is a series really meant to be read and enjoyed as a single issue series. And I feel like that's something that we've kind of lost in comics as well. It feels like everything is written for the trade. And because of that, you get that decompressed storytelling. You get stuff that feels drawn out. And you get storylines that feel like they didn't earn it. They didn't earn the treatment of a trade to be put in. I mean, remember trades back in the day? We were talking about like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, Dark Phoenix Saga, God Loves, Man Kills with the X-Men. You get these kinds of storylines that either they were set up in a way where they were outside, not completely maybe outside of continuity, but outside of continuity enough that it felt like, okay, this is a prestigious format. This is a big deal. Or these were really popular storylines. But then eventually we hit a point where it felt like every 6 to 10 issues became a trade just cause. And I think we lost a lot in comics that way. We got away from the ongoing episodic format where you could develop new characters and stories organically. It became event driven. And I think it became kind of exhausting in that sense. Where again, King Cryptid, you could go in there and maybe you just like a certain character we're writing about, or you like certain kinds of stories, so you gravitate more towards the sci-fi heavy stories or the horror heavy stories or the mystery ones. You can kind of run around and pick and choose. You don't have to necessarily feel like you're going to miss out on everything and be lost if you go that way. Of course, I'd like for you to pick up every single issue because they're all great, but it enables you the ability to go in there and go, oh yeah, I love that cover. That story looks fun. I want to pick that one up. So that's comics in a nutshell of what they used to be for decades. Mm-hmm. And that's what King Cryptid's all about.
Yeah. And do you think, forgive me if I missed it, because I was actually sharing the episode too as we were speaking, but do you think that you'll ever do like a graphic novel in the sense of like this is a separate like King Cryptid story, but I wanted to take a longer time to tell, one particular story or anything?
I've thought about it. That could be something that we do down the line. I think once the universe is really established enough, and we can have a lot of fun with something like that. But again, I'm not going to say never to it because I definitely have thought about that's a possibility to tell a maybe even almost like an outside of the continuity or an alternative version, alternaverse, an alternate version, whatever we could call it, story with King Cryptid. But that's down the line when I feel like the character's been established enough and that the readers will understand. And it's because that's the fun part is once you get enough stories out, the readers have an understanding and they go, okay, this is what this character is like. There's a trust there. You can kind of predict how he would behave in certain situations. Maybe not other characters, but King Cryptid, you feel like you know him enough. You've been with him enough that you can kind of foresee how he'd behave or interact with others. So when it's something like that, it's fun to play upon it with like an Elseworld sort of deal and an alternate version kind of a thing, and maybe even have fun with that, or tell the story completely through someone else's point of view. But that's the thing too about King Cryptid is that I can just make that a King Cryptid issue. I don't necessarily have to do a graphic novel as long as I'm working within the continuity of the book itself. But yeah, there's all kinds of different things that we could do with it.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'll figure something out one day if I want to do something like that.
It's funny though. I think about that possibility, but then I also think about how series like this, or also like in like episodic TV shows, and like sitcoms, even, and all kinds of things like that, you actually get so much more in depth with those kind of storytelling because the characters evolve throughout the whole, like, say there's like 7 seasons of a TV show or something. If it's written well, the characters, you get to see like much more in depth the complexity of each character, and the same can be done with a comic book. So it's funny because you think you're getting like a bunch of little short stories, but you're actually getting a really huge story that's much bigger than a movie,
Yeah,
and other
yeah.
longer form, format things.
It's like life, you know. Your entire life is comprised of moments, and it's easier to break them up maybe in the term of the day, and then you could break down the day in terms of like the hour and things like that. But that kind of storytelling mirrors life, and
Hmm.
every day's a new issue, you know. So you put them all together, and there's a couple story arcs within all of our lives, depending on what the event is, and that kind of a thing. But most of what we go through each day has a beginning, middle, and an end, you know, and it feels like, okay, today's over, on to the next day. You know, and it's that kind of vibe within these series as well. And I think that's what really resonates a lot of the time with people too, is that they feel like, okay, I read issue 1 of King Cryptid. And when that ends, it feels like that day has kind of concluded. And you go on to the next day, and let's see what the next day holds for this character and this world, you know,
Hmm.
and it's easier to relate even on that level, as opposed to like the expanse, the never-ending expanse of, you know, a big gigantic event over and over and over again, and it's got like many layers to it, and then by the time it wraps up, because they always kind of start interesting and they always kind of end horribly. I can't think of too many of the big events where I felt like that was an unbelievably satisfying conclusion. You know, they usually try to outsmart the reader. It throws too many twists that don't make any sense, and a lot of things end up happening that feel like they're being forced, a certain outcome is being forced because you don't want to do certain things, because you don't want to get rid of certain characters, you don't want to put certain events in place where you have to write your way out of that. So things end up kind of coming to almost a predictable conclusion or a completely nonsensical, stupid one where it's like, oh, they really wrote themselves into a corner. But
Hmm.
if you were able to just go in there, tell a story, make it that there's going to be some kind of continuity involved, and have the crux of the story not based upon fooling or subverting or outsmarting the reader, but entertaining them,
Hmm.
providing something to them that makes them go, oh, wow, or makes them think about something, or adds depth to the characters, or builds upon the world, or all these different moments you could do that enrich the story. You know,
Hmm.
and that I think is ultimately what entertains people,
Hmm.
not the other way around where it's constantly trying to, you know, it's like this chess game that you're trying to play constantly with the story. That becomes frustrating, and ultimately no one really wins that because people get frustrated.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, speaking about all this stuff, it does all kind of actually relate to the topic, but let's get a little bit deeper into this idea of single vision versus collaborative comics.
Sure, yeah.
Um, I was thinking, I was actually thinking that the chair was kind of more of a single vision comic, but then I looked at the credits and it looks like you did work with at least one other person or maybe a couple other people on
Yeah,
there.
yeah. There was an artist on the book.
Hmm.
I'd like to mention their name, but they don't want me to mention their name, even though their name's in print on 4 editions of the book and then multiple printings of single issues. People
Hmm.
are silly. So working with the artist on the book, this was a while ago. This was back in like 2005, 2006, 2006 to
Hmm.
2008. We made the book, and so working with them, I gave a very traditional script, direction in terms of panel layout, captions, dialogue, etc. And and it wasn't a bad experience working with him. There was a moment in what turned out to be the last act of the book where there was like 4 or 5 pages that he took it upon himself to completely go off script and not tell me about it. And I get him back, and I was like, "Why didn't you tell me that none of this is matching up?" I was like, "This is very pivotal of how this has to play out at the ending."
Hmm.
And so he was kind of holding his ground with it, and that was a frustrating experience because I had wished that he had just collaborated instead with me, instead of doing the whole like he just decided that wasn't good, we'll do it this way instead. And it was very different from what was supposed to play out, and I had to end up going in there because he refused to redraw anything, and I had to go in there and kind of piece together as much of what he drew and create the story as it needed to be to have it play out. So that
Wow.
was an interesting experience, and that was one of the first times I did collaborate with someone on a series, and
Hmm.
that was something I didn't want to happen again. And so from that point on, anytime I worked with someone, I said, anytime you want to go in there and you want to bounce an idea off of me, like feel free to just talk to me.
Hmm.
Don't go in there and start drawing stuff, because he was so frustrated because he's like, well, I already drew all this, I'm not going to redraw anything, and blah blah blah. And that was just this was we were both relatively young, I guess, the early 20s, and and not really understanding, I guess, how to work together. I'm
Hmm.
sure that I was probably to blame with some of the stuff too, and probably felt a little more hurt by what he did. But it
Hmm.
was one of those things where it was a learning experience, and it was at least able to be saved in some respect. But King Crypt has been great with the collaboration so far,
Hmm.
working with a lot of different artists, and it's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. So I know that you do have experience with comics that are single vision with alternate at the very least, but also I'm curious, have you ever done any kind of comic totally on your own? Because obviously you do draw and stuff as
Hmm.
well.
No, no. Well, I mean, nothing I want to talk about. Let's put it that way. They were horrible, and it was
Okay.
actually the first two issues that were the first two comics ever at Alterna, which was Spectrum #1 and Spectrum #2. And
Okay.
Spectrum means kind of something different now, but back then, the book was based on the spectrum of light. It was about this scientist that was creating a suit that could bend the spectrum of light, and you could go invisible, or the light could become hard, like a hard hologram.
Hmm.
So depending on, or transparent and intangible. So depending upon what was activated in it, and it was neurally activated, the user would be trained to wear it. And something happens, an accident occurs, as so often it does with scientists in comic books,
Hmm.
and the suit bonds with him, and he ends up not being able to control it at first, so he's all over the place. And it was two issues, and it was fun, but it was a learning lesson. A learning lesson. It was horrible, 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 horrible. If it got submitted to me, if Pete from 2005 submitted that to Pete from 2023, I'd say, you know, you got a lot of work to do. So it's and I'd be kind, to my past self, but uh, it definitely is a book that it needed a lot of work on all fronts. Even things like lettering, I was trying to go for something.
Hmm.
I was in college at the time when I was coming up with it, and I felt like I should make something completely different across the board.
Hmm.
Because that's what they drill into you in college, right? It's just originality, originality, and most of the time, originality just turns into, yeah. There's a reason no one really does it this way, because it's horrible.
Yeah.
So obsessing more about being original as opposed to being good and grounded and understanding why things are done the way they're done. That comic definitely, again, was a learning experience, and it taught me what I did like about making comics. So I like the writing, I like the lettering. When I got it out of my head to not screw with it, get to the basics of it. You know what to do. Stop messing around, and let someone else do the interiors because I didn't have the patience for the interiors. I don't mind doing a cover or anything like that, but if I'm spending, even when I draw a sketch card, if I'm spending like 20 minutes on a sketch card, I'm like, oh, this is torture. So I'm usually doing the quick 5-minute sketches. I like doing that. And
Mm.
so it's one of those things where I figured, well, okay, I'll hire someone to do the interiors that's good at doing interiors on comics, and they could do the cover as well. Of course, I want them to have the prestige of the spotlight of the cover if they're going to work hard on the interiors, and I'll do what I not only really like, but what I feel like I'm stronger at, which would be the
Mm.
writing and the lettering. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what I took from that, and but it needed to happen. I needed to go through that and make those two really crappy comics and learn quickly from it because you can't spend too much time being so stubborn about your vision or what it is you want to accomplish that you don't understand your strengths and weaknesses.
Mm.
You got to really like every single page, every issue, you got to do a self-assessment and get in there and go, okay, well, did I really struggle with this? Was this a torture session? Do I want to continue with this? What do I love about it? What don't I love about it? Go in there and be your own editor. Take a step back and objectively view it. Give yourself a little time and then come back to it, like any kind of piece of art. You know, and even sometimes revisit it a year later after you've accrued so much more skill and experience, and then look back and give it another shot and consider it and be honest with yourself. Be brutally honest with yourself, because if you're not going to be brutally honest with yourself, other people will.
Mm.
So that's the kind of thing where I did that, and with the chair, I did the writing and the lettering, and then I did with the old school mouse, kind of doing the coloring, so it looked like
Mm.
a charcoal effect. I did like a subtractive kind of coloring, so I would do a low opacity, but enough that I could see the pencils, the loose pencils underneath, and then erase away with various opacity to get the black to look like that charcoal effect. And I did it all with a mouse. I don't know if I could do that today.
Yeah,
But
that's
that was another learning experience. So, along the way, people go, you should never work for free because you're working for exposure. That's bad. And I agree. Don't ever work for exposure because that exposure sucks. You're exposing people when you work for free for exposure. You're at a point where you're not good enough to be paid,
mm.
because if you were, you'd work for money. So that means that if you are working for exposure, let's say you do jump into a project that has eyes on it, you're letting them see how bad you are. So never work for exposure. You work for experience.
Mhm.
And that is vital. The working experience of working with other people, the working experience of working on a project. And then as you get better and better, then you're able to command a salary, a page rate, etc.
Mhm.
How can you go into any skill-based, performance-based job and demand pay when you have no experience and there's no, you can't look at anything and point to it and say that's the work I did, and we sold X amount and I was on that book. It So you go in there and it should always be about working for experience to get better and better, build up your portfolio, your resume, that kind of a thing. And then you can command getting paid.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I agree. If you're working for exposure, I mean, no, but that doesn't mean that you can't, have certain situations where maybe you are working for free, but like you said, you're working for experience, and that's a good takeaway because a lot of people, um, they kind of let that get in the way of like, um, a lot of people say like, working for exposure is horrible, never work for exposure, but that doesn't mean like if you're working for free, there's definitely benefits to that when you're first starting. You don't want to work for free for very long. Once you get that experience, you want to,
Exactly.
get paid, but it is worth it actually. So I don't know, to
Yeah,
me
yeah.
at least,
You got to
personally.
also, there's a lot of people who, I mean, and we're not talking about you've made a bunch of things already and
Hmm.
you got stuff to show.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of people out there who have next to nothing to
Hmm.
show, and they don't want to work on anything for free. They don't even want to work for themselves for free because that's who
Right.
you. I mean, you're not going to pay yourself. I mean, you could, but it's
Hmm.
odd, you know. But so even if you want to just work for yourself for free for experience, you know,
Yeah.
you're still going to work for free. And you want to do that and you want to get that out there. You want to build up your skills. You want to even make sure that this is something you want to do because you know
Hmm.
what it's like. This is time intensive,
Hmm.
you know, and it's demanding, especially when you're still deep in the weeds and you have no idea what you're really doing. You know,
Yeah.
you're not just gonna set up like a couple of boxes and then draw on the boxes and put a balloon and go, it's a comic, you know, and then you could do that, and we all kind of start off that
Yeah.
way in some way. But you know, it's is that going to be the thing that really takes you far, or is that what you really want to accomplish? You know,
Right.
so you're still learning, and when you're still learning, when you're still a student of the craft in that respect, you know, you need to have those expectations curbed for yourself. It doesn't mean you're going to stay there forever, but it means that you gotta learn, you gotta build it up, and then
Yeah.
eventually, after maybe a year or two or three goes by of doing stuff like that, uh, then you're going to be able to look back and go, wow, my work has gotten so much better over the course of that time. And now I can demand getting paid because I've got the skills to back it up. And once that happens, and especially when you get your work out there too, that's something else that people don't do. They don't share their work.
Hmm.
So if you never share your work and you never build up a following and any interest in it, then
Yeah.
that's also going to be difficult to point out your value. You know, you're living in kind of this bubble where only you're really aware of your work and maybe whoever you've worked for. And if you're not showing it around and letting people see what you're doing, that's going to be difficult to point out why you're bringing value to this project, because you also bring value in multiple ways, not just the skill that you can do on the task, but you know, are you bringing people who are interested in your work that are like, oh man, you know, as soon as you work on something, you know, let me know because I want to check it out. I want to
Hmm.
buy a copy. You know,
Yeah.
but if you never let people know, you're never going to get those people who come along and say that.
Hmm.
So that kind of stuff is valuable too, to be able to show people, hey, look, I'm adding something to this project, and I'm also good. I have
Yeah.
skills that can back it up, so that's why I should get paid what that is.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's surprising what just showing up will do. You know, if you got some skill and you make a thing and you put it out there, you know, you certainly can't guarantee that you're suddenly going to become, you know, the next comic book superstar if there ever was one. But but you're gonna you'd be surprised. You get a few people reading your comic and you'll start to get some people and some interesting feedback.
Yeah,
So just putting the work out there. I feel like is it's a huge step. It's a tough step, but it's you'll be surprised that you will get some traction. You know, especially if you have a bit of skill. You know, so.
absolutely. Yeah.
And speaking about getting paid for what you do, yes, there may have been a commercial. I know that sometimes they're not so fun, but you know, that's the nature of the YouTube verse. That sometimes there are commercials. So it is a little weird,
Yeah,
but
keep in mind, Randy, we're not on my channel. I take the commercials off of my channel. So,
mhm.
in case he's confused and didn't expect that, that would be
uh,
why.
yes. And also, I am aware that my face is blurry, which is really weird. I don't know
Oh,
why
that's strange. Yeah.
my camera wants to do weird focusy things, but it is what it is. At least you can hear me,
Technology.
hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, you sound fine.
All right, cool. Um, so I think you know, it's kind of funny and interesting. You talked about this uh, earlier, but I feel like we've been talking about this as well, as like this idea of like ego and how that can become a problem when we're creating our comics, when we're even whether we're collaborating with somebody or doing you know, a single vision type of thing. uh, and I just I think that that gets in the way often for comic creators, and it's gotten in the way for me. There's definitely times where I've had to say, what, like you said, this isn't the best thing for the story, and that's a hard lesson sometimes when you really want to, like, I want to put this in, and I want to do this, and I, this is the way I want to do it, but sometimes you have to let some of these things go. Do you find that to be a bit of a process when you're creating?
Yeah, I find that it's a person to person scenario. I find
Mhm.
that there's people who they're very creative, but at the same time, their creativity can kind of get the better of them because it turns into, well, I think this character should do that and be this way and look that way and have this power and be designed like this instead. And it's like that that might be great, but when you're in the context of characters you're working with, there has to be a reason that it makes sense to do that. And if you're gonna do it, you can't abruptly do that. So even if that's something you build towards, like let's say you want to have your character be a martial arts expert all of a sudden, you have to find a way to make that happen.
Mhm.
They can't just all of a sudden be a martial arts expert. They can't all of a sudden just be they just are a giant mutant beast out of nowhere, and you go, well, that's what that is. There has to be an explanation for, well, what happened,
Yeah.
and if it's going to be a surprise where you just introduce it, then you have to be able to explain it later too.
Mhm.
But there's sometimes I find that, and it doesn't happen a lot, but there's times where it's happened where I find that the collaborator or on someone else's book, maybe at Alterna, and they're working with someone and they're trying to help me. They're trying to have me help them to kind of talk about the situation to the person they're working with.
Mm.
It becomes this. You have to really understand what is working within the realm of the story, and does that make sense? Is that because it really is. It's difficult to explain to someone when it feels like they're doing that, and they might think they're doing something that's great, but that's not the character. Like if all of a sudden, and I think we see this a lot actually now that I think about it going on in mainstream comics, it feels like, and maybe that's why it's working itself a little bit into the indie sphere, and not a lot, but a little bit, where people take a character that's been the character for a long time, no matter what. It's looked at, the characters look that way, they behave that way, they have this kind of power, they have that kind of costume, whatever it may be. They're this gender, they're that sexuality, whatever. And then they change it out of almost nowhere,
Mhm.
and they'll kind of explain it sometime, but the explanation feels so strange. Feels so out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing that happens when you're working with anybody, where if someone were to do that and take a character that you've created, let's say I work with someone on King Cryptid and they go, yeah, I think it'd be great if King Cryptid instead was pink, or that he was green now, and that's how he should look. It'd be like, but that's not how he looks.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things. Or like King Cryptid should have 5 fingers now instead of 3. It's like, but he doesn't have 5, he has 3.
Yeah.
So just even simple things like that, it'll be interesting trying to keep an artist within the line of being true to the character, not just visually, but also, would King Cryptid run around with a big old toothy grin all the time? Like, he's not that character. It's
Yeah.
that kind of a thing too. So, being able to understand the character and stay consistent with that, and make sure again that everything is playing out for the best of the story. Now, again, are some of those ideas, could they work? Like, let's say if someone wants to make King Cryptid do something that I'm thinking, wow, that could be pretty cool. Again, is that in the realm of the story we're currently writing, or is that something maybe we could do later on? That's two different approaches. So you have to approach it and make sure it makes sense for the story. It could be a great idea. It doesn't mean it isn't. but you got to make sure that you can implement that appropriately.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean when you change something or do something like that, it's a it's a really awesome opportunity actually to tell some more story and to bring the reader in. The why of how something happens. Why did this change? I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of like Spider-Man. He got that black suit and everything, and there's a why to that. And then he lost the black suit, and then Venom became a thing. And but they had to make a why to that. And eventually that it makes it interesting, to you know it's easy, I think, to fall into that trap, especially if you're making a comic in a certain genre, especially with superhero comics. You just assume, okay, this person, can do combat, hand to hand combat. They can also fly. They also have a cape. They have the like. There's a reason why Superman has a cape. There's like different things. Like there's reasons why certain things happen, and that's what makes some of those stories, those details. That's some of the things that make the stories really interesting. And if
yeah.
you take that if you take that away and you just, okay, bam, this character is awesome, and you just got to believe it. You like it loses like so much.
Yeah, yeah, you got to give that build up. You got to provide the reasons. You got to. That's where the show don't tell
Hmm.
becomes a thing. So let's say, referencing the Spider-Man black costume. If all of a sudden Spider-Man just shows up and he's got a black costume and he's like,
Hmm.
just felt like it, just felt like making a black costume today. Could
Hmm.
you do that? Yeah, you could do that. Is it as interesting as it could be? No. you know, or his red and blue suit got damaged, so he's like, "What do I got? I buy this black thing, okay, and I'll just make this into a costume." It's not as compelling, it's not as interesting as what they came up with, and then you can't do anything. You couldn't have Venom then out of that,
Hmm.
right? Because you
Yeah.
you need this living alien symbiote kind of a thing happening, and you couldn't do that if Spider-Man just felt like making a cloth black costume. So the storytelling possibilities open up, and it's tremendous. But that's why when certain ideas are introduced, it's even if it's a good one, and it doesn't happen too much. Like this isn't who I work with on King Cryptid would be work for hire, so they're not really like co-collaborators, co-creators on that level. They're collaborators in the way that when I give them the script, I make sure to give them a lot of creative freedom in terms of how they're going to lay it out, in terms of how they're going to draw it. Even when I send them character descriptions or even sketches and do character designs for them, I tell them, here it is, check it out, and if you can build on it, I want to see what you're making and this and that, but this is what the character would look like. So that kind of process of it, depending on how much, if they do make changes and improvements and that kind of a thing, and I really like them, then there turns into another situation of getting some kind of either a royalty on a design or a co-creator credit or whatever it may be, depending on how much it is. But if it's something as simple as like you straightened out a collar or you're designing the crown of bone a little different, like that's just artist interpretation at that point. But if it's something like, let's say, someone came up with King Cryptid's cosmic moonstone, the thing that's in the centerpiece there, if someone else had come up with that, then that's pivotal to the entire character. So that would be a co-creation thing because there's a lot of stuff that revolves around that piece. So it depends in a lot of different ways, and everyone does it differently in terms of how they work with people. Some people do the co-creator thing where they work and collaborate from start to finish together, and then others do where they've got it's kind of like more of what I'm doing, where they've got everything laid out and there's the groundwork, and then they're sketching out characters, or they're hiring someone for character design, and there's more layers to it. But the artist that works on it is work for hire, and they don't own a creation percentage of it or anything like that. So there's all kinds of different things that come about within comics for that way. But it's always interesting when you're working with people who have really good ideas, but they never really do their own books for the most part, because that's something that I try to encourage people with too. When I find they have really great ideas, is that I'm like, keep some of that for your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel like you shouldn't share upon those ideas with who you're working with, but at the same time, if it's like you're coming up with a character for King Cryptid, the universe, maybe keep that for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and build your own series. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But it's the kind of thing where sometimes some people, they get in there and I think they get very excited and they're creative, and I'm not saying that I'm this kind of person who would then take advantage of an individual like that, but there's people who would. And you got to be careful about that in the midst of that excitement, understanding that sometimes maybe ideas like that you got to keep to yourself, and make your own series and make your
Yeah.
own character, not necessarily. Or if you do make that character established with that individual, okay, well, I created this character. So if you do merchandise or this or that or the other thing, or this turns into a movie or a show or a toy line one day, and they
Mm-hmm.
want to do something with that character, I created that character, and get it in writing, and all of that kind of stuff stipulated out. A lot of the time people don't go and think about stuff like that because they think it's the equivalent of getting like a prenup when you're getting married, and it could strain the relationship right off the bat. But that's you looking out for yourself in that position. It's not necessarily a prenup. It's not anything along those lines in terms of it should make it weird. If you're coming up with a character, if you're working with a collaborator on a project and you're work for hire, and you pitch a character to them, and be wary that that's your character, document that, and then keep an eye open, because if they end up putting a character that's just like that down the line in the book, and Hollywood's notorious for that, right?
Yeah.
They'll look at scripts and they won't option any of them, and then sometimes there'll be one similar down the line, or sometimes they'll option yours because they already have one they're working on that they've bought that's in development that's a little similar to yours, and you're not aware of it, and they're kind of paying you off because they want to develop the thing they're currently working on, and yours goes into development hell. So, and the same kind of thing will occur in comics too, and it's important for people to be aware of that. Just nothing wrong with kind of minding your p's and q's when it comes to protecting your character creations. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's always better to err on the side of caution when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For sure. Now, I think we've kind of really danced around this topic, and we've definitely been hitting on some interesting points that have to do with this. But as a general, as a whole, just to really get into it, I'm curious what your thoughts and opinions are on kind of single vision comics versus collaborative comics. Yeah,
Hmm.
in general.
Well, I love a lot of the single vision ones where,
Mhm.
so even at Alterna, we got Rob Geronimo with Blood Realm, we got Horace H. Hoover, made by Fabrizio Aiello, Brian Baugh's working on Wolf and Batsy, and they do everything on it,
Mhm.
writing, art, lettering.
Mhm.
So I love stuff like that, where people can go in there and they can create a comic completely on their own. And they're not really necessarily working with someone. And if they are, maybe they're working with an editor, or they've got at least someone they can kind of send it to say, "Hey, is this okay? What do you think?" That kind of a thing. It's always valuable to get feedback from someone you trust.
Mhm.
Someone that and what I mean, not someone who's going to be like, yeah, this is great, everything you do is great, but more like someone that they're going to honestly give you their opinion, and
Mhm.
that that they're going to tell you when sometimes it's not so great, or it's confusing, or whatever it may be. And this way you're able to course correct. But yeah, I love that kind of aspect of it. Collaboration, again, the effort is great at getting that kind of thing going, but it really has to be people being able to work together on that. And there's
Mhm.
some people who, throughout the history of comics, didn't really seem to like each other, but worked wonderfully together and were able to make some great stuff.
That's
Um,
true.
yeah, even on like sports teams too. You know, there's
Mhm.
so many stories of teammates who can stand each other, but when the game was on the line, you know, they worked together great because they could put that aside and accomplish the goal at hand. So yeah, there's a lot of instances like that, but then there's also instances too where people just don't seem to get along on any level, and it plays out bad. And I've even known people. It's even happened to me where I could like the person a lot, and I'm just like, it's just not right. It's just not the right fit for the project. You
Mhm.
know, so there's all kinds of things that can happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one's going to be better or one's going to be worse. Because I think the pitfall of the single vision comic could be the fact that you're kind of creating an isolated environment.
Mhm.
If you really don't show anyone, if you really don't kind of let anybody else even have any kind of not input, but even like feedback on the smallest level, not
Mhm.
even necessarily a critique, because the reader will critique you and give you feedback when that day comes. And I think sometimes, depending upon the person, sometimes they might handle it great, and sometimes maybe not so great.
Mhm.
Uh, so it depends how close are you to that. Are you creating it with the mindset involved that this is for someone else to enjoy, or is this like a purely selfish effort that is just getting out there? And it's
Mhm.
kind of like a narcissistic thing to get out there and put your book out there, and you want to be given praise for it. And any critique, criticism, feedback, no matter how minute, is it going to come to you and you're going to be like, they just don't get it, and you're going to be dismissive and maybe even mean about it. uh,
Mhm.
it depends on the person, but yeah, I think both efforts are great, but it
Mhm.
really does depend on the personality of the people involved.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's pretty much how I feel as well. I think it's interesting that, and I think the key is partially in the way it's phrased, the single vision for that particular approach is it is a vision, and I think that's one of the things that maybe have driven people to do a single vision comic, because they probably have worked with collaborators, but there's something to be said for having your own vision and having the control to really make that thing look and feel and read and sound and all that thing like what you are imagining.
Yeah, like a
And
100%, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and not everybody can pull it off. It's a special effort, I feel like, for sure. And like I always, whenever I think single vision, I automatically think of Frank Miller, because I think he's
Mm,
kind of
yeah,
one of, if not like the master of the single vision comic.
he's like a
Um,
comic book auteur.
yeah, and not many people can pull it off like him, but there is a lot of people who have done it. I feel like more often than not, it's in the independent realm of things.
Yeah,
But
I think just because the nature of the corporate comic world is so deadline oriented, you need that kind of assembly line
mhm,
procedure to keep things expedited. And that's something too when it comes to King Cryptid. If I had to make every issue 100% start to finish, I'd probably just have issue 1 out right now.
right.
You know, and there's no way I could have done 4 issues. So being able to hire 4 different artists for 4 issues, you know, writing them out, lettering them, sure, it takes time and effort and whatnot, but it's nothing close to the Herculean task of drawing 4 issues within a year.
Yeah.
So on that level, it really helps to be able to crank stuff out and still manage to put the quality there and have the story stay consistent and stay entertaining, because otherwise I couldn't do that if I didn't have other artists helping out, and you know, 1 per issue, or maybe at the most 2 per the chunk of whatever it is, 4 or 5 issues that are going out. There's no way I could be able to get that many out within a
Hmm.
year.
Yeah.
So God bless him. I'm thankful for him.
Yeah. But and like I mean you think again about, somebody like Frank Miller doing like Sin City or something, or even, The Dark Knight Returns and stuff. And I think there were other people working on that one, but still for the most part it was kind of like a single vision situation. But like, especially Sin City, like you do that in chunks, kind of, and he's gone for long periods of time without doing any, and then he does another chunk or however it works. And it's not like you're gonna sit there and do very rarely do people do a single vision comic for like the span of like 10, 20 years. You got, I think of like Dave Sim and like Cerebus, like that's one example where that actually did happen. And I even think of like Eric Larson with Savage Dragon, but of course there have been gaps there, but he's been pretty darn consistent. But again, like the results do vary, that's why I think of Frank Miller as kind of like a master of it, because he can write his butt off and he can also draw his butt off, and like he's got the chops to really make it happen. And some different examples, maybe they don't have the writing chops so much. Maybe it would have been better if somebody else wrote it, or maybe they don't have the drawing chops so much, or it's maybe like you said, the right fit. Like sometimes your own self is not the right fit. Like
Yeah, yeah,
right now I'm working on a comic, and I had a friend of mine, Teresa Del Pilar, illustrate it, and it's a romance type of goofy little comic. And if I drew it, it wouldn't have the charm that it has, because I just don't have that style. And it's so much better because she drew it,
yeah,
and I'm looking now, because I've I wrote it and saw her do the art. There's something really magical about getting art back of something you wrote, and I'm looking forward to working with her some more and expanding the story because it was so good, and her art really made what I wrote sing.
yeah, yeah. It's unbelievable sometime when you work with certain people where it feels like they just took the image right out of your brain and then they made it better.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a wonderful experience working with an artist that could do that, and you just don't get that fun when you're doing it on your own.
Hmm.
If anything, it's kind of like a little bit of a struggle session where you're like, does that look the way I want it to look? I don't know. I got to go in there again. But yeah, it's always great working with someone who gets it and then they improve upon it too sometime, which is even better.
Hmm. And there's and this is a funny word that I don't hear anybody ever say in comics, but there's a leverage there. And what I mean by that is basically the idea of like two heads are better than one, maybe even three heads are better than one. Sometimes there's like a certain magic that happens by bringing two people together, and that it's like the whole ends up being greater than the parts. And even if egos are a problem, some of the best like bands in the history of the world,
Yeah,
they hated each other, and even with comics, I think one of the most the biggest examples with Marvel Comics, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, like I'm not saying they hated each other while they were making things like Fantastic Four, but something there, like there was definitely you know some static, even with those, because this young kid's coming in telling me what to do and how to write my stories. I've been making stories for 20 years, like this kind of thing. And it's like, but there was something magical in that collaboration
yeah,
that
they were
created
less without
something
each
awesome.
other,
Hmm.
and you can see that with the stuff that they created apart.
Hmm.
And yeah, some people they fuel each other, and I think even if you don't necessarily like each other, if you have a respect for the skill level involved or what that person's at least bringing to the table, I think you could still create something incredible. Yeah, but
Hmm.
that has to be there too. There has to be that level of professionalism where you understand not just what you are bringing, but what that other person is bringing as well. Otherwise, it falls apart pretty fast, and it gets weird, and it gets too personal, and yeah, it becomes a bad situation. I see in the chat Levi asking for a good place to go for creator contracts. I wish I could recommend one, but what I tell most people is to be honest with what you're expecting from not just the other person, but also from yourself, and always try to. It's like this. It's such a cliche in negotiation. Try to ask for what you want so that you can get what you need. So even if you go for 100% ownership on something, put it out there. Maybe they say, yeah, 100% ownership, you got it. Or maybe they say, well, what about 50? And you can kind of go back and forth. As long as you don't turn into, and both sides have to do this, as long as they don't turn into something weird and personal and that there's some kind of, someone's trying to screw someone else or whatever it is, you can reach an agreement. And hopefully you find that it's a fair agreement. But the thing with all of that is just try to lay out your terms and be as not just fair to yourself as possible, but fair to the situation even. I think some people, even within comics, they look at a certain situation, let's say page rate. They'll go into a comic that is with people who maybe have no proven track record of anything. And then they're commanding a page rate or wanting a page rate, let's say, of $200 a page. And meanwhile, there's no way that these individuals are going to sell anything close to support a $200 page rate. So people go in there and then they go, oh yeah, they don't want to pay me what I'm worth. Well, you're not worth that. If you were worth that, then the sales would be commiserate with that and they would support it. So you have to then prove to that individual why that $200 page rate is worth it. Because if it's just about, again, this is a performance-based system. It's the same thing with professional sports. Imagine if everyone's like, I'm the star of the team. It's like, but are you? Are you producing the same as the star on the team would produce? Do you have the same level of skill and talent that's there that is commiserate with that? Are you putting butts in the seats? Are people showing up for you? Are they buying that issue because you're drawing it or you're writing it? And even we see this a lot of the time in corporate comics where the character is truly greater than the creators involved. So some people will go in there and they will have worked on a certain character who's very popular, and then they go independent, and then they go, well, where the hell's everybody? Why can't I raise anything close to what I was selling on that other book? And it's because they weren't buying that book for you. They bought that book for the character. They might have liked what you did with that character, but you're essentially now starting from not zero, but you're starting at pretty down there again. So you got to make sure people are aware that you did what you did on that book. You got to make sure you're talking about your character, your work, all these kinds of things. Again, being very quick to share about what you're working on too. There's so much secrecy involved in indie comic stuff. It's like people don't want to talk about their character. I'm giving everything away. I don't want, and then I'm like, I don't even know what the hell your book is about. What do you mean you're giving stuff away? I don't even know the character name. There's a difference between spoiling the events of a book, and if you're even a decent storyteller, you should be aware of what a spoiler is. You should be aware of what a surprise moment is in that book and what a reveal is and all that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between that and between just talking about the character and talking about what you're creating. So talk about what you're creating. Show what you're creating. And it'll benefit you. And readers can make a more informed decision. And, maybe someone hears about it or they see something, but they have no idea what the hell that is, why it's like that, whatever. And because someone doesn't want to talk about it. And then they go, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to check it out because I don't know anything about it. But then there's other people who've created stuff and they talk about it and they get it out there and they make a better, more informed decision and they feel confident about it because they know more about it. And then they go and purchase that. So there's a huge difference there. But yeah, don't be so, what is the word? Don't be so precious about every single thing
Mm,
that you create that you never end up sharing any of it.
yeah. And I mean, if it's a good story, like I feel like if you're so afraid to share um, details, I feel like maybe it's not actually a good story because if it's such a good story, like there's certain movies, comics, whatever that I've read and read again and read again and watched again, and I know the ending of the story. I know all the spoilers.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
still entertaining. I still want to be in that world, you know.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, I grew up big on the trading cards that Marvel and DC put out, where they would highlight various things in the bio or the description of whatever had occurred in certain issues. It
Hmm.
just made me want to read more about the character.
Hmm.
It didn't, if it was just a one sentence description that was like, this character is a superhero, you'd be like, okay, that's great. There's nothing in there that's making you go, I really want to check that out. But if they start explaining their personality, if they start explaining a couple of key events in their history that made them the way they are, that's interesting, and that
Hmm.
makes you want to go seek out and learn more about that specific character. It's the same thing with people. Imagine, when you're talking to someone that they don't really say much.
Hmm.
You feel like I don't really know who this person is. It's not mysterious at that point. It's frustrating. So you're just like, I don't really want to talk to that person. Whenever I
Hmm.
talk to them, they don't say a damn word. So I don't really know who the hell they are. But then people that you do have a connection with and you can have conversations with, you find yourself wanting to have more conversations with them. It's just like anything else.
Hmm. Yeah. For sure. We got a couple of questions coming in. What Geeks Do Network says, if I'm looking for an artist, how do you recommend going about it? Social media, any group I should join, preferably work for hire?
Hmm. I don't know if they still do this at all, but uh, digital webbing used to have a talent search, which was great. I haven't been on that for a long time. I know
Mm,
people used to look on like DeviantArt and Pencil Jack and whatnot. I don't know if any of that even still exists on that capacity. But yeah, social media. So if you're a writer, get your story idea out there. You don't have to go crazy with it. Get your story idea out there. Let people know you're willing to pay, or maybe if you're not, what you're expecting. Let people know your experience level, and tell people about what the character is and the kind of story and the genre it is, and ask people to send you samples that are interior samples if you're looking for an interior artist, or cover, pinup, etc. if you're looking for that kind of a thing, or like covers and splash pages, that sort of deal. That's good for that, but it's not gonna tell you about what they could do as an interior artist. It's two separate skill levels. So be mindful of that as well when you're asking for people to send you stuff. But there's so many ways to go about it nowadays with social media, and there's so many talented artists. So best of luck to you.
yeah, there's a lot. I feel like there's more supply than demand when it comes to comic book artists, and you know, as somebody who's an artist and wants to draw a well-written story, I find it harder to find a writer because not only do
Mm.
you need to find a writer, everybody says they can write comics, but you need to find a good writer, and those are few and far between. So right now, my journey is to learn how to write better personally because I feel like there are good writers out there, but it's not necessarily easy, and they might not write the kind of comic you want to draw. But it's easy when to almost to look for an artist because you can right away see some of their art and at least know, oh yeah, that's kind of the style I want to go for or something like that. Again, I 100% agree with what Peter said as far as you got to find interiors when it comes to comics because people might be able to draw a pretty picture, but it's a whole different
Yeah, the
thing.
storytelling capability is like that is so integral. So, the people I work with, so let's say Christian Rossi on this one, we
Oh
got
yeah.
Nick Hunter on here,
Mhm.
and all the cover artists here are doing the interiors. You get Alex Jovich on this one, and then Kier Covington with Christian Rossi on the colors here. Now, those are all very great, fun looking covers. But if Christian wasn't solid with his storytelling,
Oh yeah. He's a master.
you know, and the same goes for all of them.
Hmm.
If it was just kind of they could make a cool image, and that was it, but there's no storytelling, there's no expression, there's no background, there's no atmosphere, there's no mood, there's no pacing, there's no use of when to focus on certain things and when to pull back.
Hmm.
If there wasn't any of that, then he could just continue to make covers
Hmm.
because he's useless then as an interior artist. So definitely, you want to make sure that you're checking out someone's interior arts as well for what they're working on. If you're hiring for that, don't just look at it and go, "Oh, that's a really cool cover."
Hmm.
I'm gonna hire them for the book, and
Hmm.
then more often than not, people will not see interiors, and then they start getting the interiors, and you're like, everything is just a static, face forward image, and it reads boring, and you're gonna find that your story's really gonna suffer for that.
Hmm.
Uh, Something else too. Red says, "I'm making a comic, but I have no clue how to sell it." So the biggest thing that I could say with that is never think about selling. I know that sounds weird. Don't think about selling it. Think about sharing it. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean you got to give it away for free. It means that you got to tap into the part of your life where you used to create stuff, usually when you were a kid, and you were excited to show it off. You're excited to let people see it. You're excited to talk about it. You have to get into that mindset because the selling will come from that. There's a time to sell. Selling will be the thing you do when you're directing people specifically. It's available for sale. Like you can go to kingcryptid.com, pick up issues 5 to 9. If you missed the first 4, you can get them there. But if I didn't talk at all about what the character is like, if I didn't show any of it or whatever, you'd go, those are just words. Those are just meaningless words. I don't know what that means. King Cryptid, 5 to who cares? you know.
Hmm.
So you got to make sure, and it's not going to connect with everybody with when you talk about it, but be excited about it, talk about it, share the work. So if you do have the comic done, if you've got art to show off, show that off. Let people see a couple pages, maybe at the least a couple panels, and talk about the character, talk about the plot of the story, who it's for. If it's a mature story, if it's all ages, if it's a horror story, is it an adventure story? What kind of a thing is it? And you'll be surprised if you keep that conversation going, and you have to initiate that conversation
Hmm.
because no one's going to know you exist and what you're doing unless you talk about it.
Hmm.
So then you'll find, oh, the selling, even though it's not going to be all of a sudden everyone's going to just throw money at you, the selling comes from that. But you have to be first in that mindset, and there's less pressure too for you when you go into it looking to share, looking to just let people know about it, and come from that place. And then people will go, oh, I like this. Where can I get it? You'll always get that question eventually. So
Hmm.
best of luck to you with that.
Yeah, and I think it's I think almost what you're talking about because I feel like selling, it's actually not that hard. You just let people know where they can find it. You
Yeah.
give them an opportunity to buy, but share, what you're saying, sharing about it. That's like the marketing, and I feel like you said, it's just sharing the excitement. There's so many people don't realize how many different ways you can do that kind of thing. You could break down a sequence of panels and just be like, this is why I decided to do this, and just talk about that. You could talk about like what in your life made you write this story or draw like you do. Like there's like an infinite amount of ways you can talk about your book and why you did it and what's exciting about
Yeah.
it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. What inspired you to make it? the kind of stuff that and not just comic wise or creator wise, but even all kinds of other things. Anything that happened in your life, any kind of subject matter you're interested in. Like with King Cryptid, I've always been interested in the supernatural, paranormal, anything mysterious, unknown, unexplained, all that stuff. Anything you find. I mean, speaking of, I'm having Robert Clotworthy on my show tomorrow. He's the narrator, the voice of Ancient Aliens.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So that's going to be fun, and he's done a lot of voice work over the years, a character actor as well. But all that kind of stuff. I've loved all that stuff for forever. So I'm putting that into King Cryptid. I'm putting everything I've loved about comics and everything I've loved about paranormal and everything else, and merging them and creating something that is something I could do for a very very long time, and love and be excited about it. So that's the thing too, is when you're a creator, are you creating something because you think this is the trendy thing, that this is the thing that people are going to like because that's what they say that people like nowadays? Because I
Hmm.
tell you, by the time you get that thing done, I don't know if people are going to still like that thing anymore. So chasing trends is a bad way to go about it. But if you're working from a place where you genuinely love and care and are interested in the thing that you're creating, it might not be for everyone. I don't know something that is for everyone. There's people out there that don't like pizza, Marsh.
That's
They
true.
don't like pizza.
Yep. I know people who don't even like cheese. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's people out there that you think there's no one out there that could possibly dislike this story, this food, this movie, this what, and there's a lot of them out there. So no matter what it is that you create, there's always going to be people out there that it's not for them. They just don't like it, whatever it is. It is no harm, no foul. But if you're creating something that's bringing you joy in a genuine way, it's going to bring other people joy. And if you're doing that and you're putting that out there, that's going to be a positive experience, and you're going to continue to feel happy about what you're making and creating, as opposed to the thing that a lot of creative people get involved in, especially once you go to the corporate level of it. You end up becoming so miserable because you have to do what the corporation requires you to do, or what that contract there says that you have to play out, and you end up being burnt out by it because you're not given a chance anymore to come from a place of positivity and a place of love of what you're creating, and you have to do what they want you to do.
Hmm.
So that's why a lot of times too, even nowadays, when they're doing different things to different characters and different stories, I don't even know that there's been such a fog of not war, but it certainly feels like that sometimes. It's a cultural fog of war in
Hmm.
terms of who's calling the shots and who's doing what, and how many of these creators that are doing these things are actively wanting genuinely to make what they're making at these places, because some of them are, but how many of them are? Are a couple of them not, and they hate it, and they just want to get the hell out of there. We've all worked jobs and been in situations in life where you're just like, I can't wait to be out of this, you know and so I can relate. When you're in that frame of mind, you're not going to put out your best stuff. You're not going to be looking forward to working that job. It's
Hmm.
going to show. But if you're an indie creator, you don't have to go that route. Create what you love, create what makes you happy, and keep doing that and share it with people.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, I feel like it would be hard to, like, I don't know, like, that's why I've pretty much always been in this indie world, and it's not because I have anything wrong with any issues with going a mainstream route. Like, if I had a property that had that kind of potential, and had people wanting that, then sure, I would happily let it go there. Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. But you know, the thing is, and this is why I was so inspired by the Image guys. As much as you can say whatever people can say stuff about them, a huge thing is just like, I really don't want to draw I love Spider-Man. I love, Wolverine and all these X-Men, all these characters. But I don't want to do those. I want to make my own. I just, and I have
Yeah, yeah.
way more ideas than I'll ever get to. And hopefully some of them are good, and hopefully some of them get out there, but like if you don't have those like ideas and you're not excited, like I don't know why you'd ever make a comic. you
Yeah,
know.
it takes a lot of time and effort. Even to do one that's horrible, it takes a
Yes.
lot of time and effort. And sometimes a lot of money if you're hiring people and whatnot. So just even the drive of really wanting to make that into a reality in that kind of thing, it takes some stuff out of you. It takes a little piece of you. But that's the thing, is that some people are, to go back to what you're talking about with music before, with people collaborating, some people are more than happy to be a cover band and play those songs for the rest of their life. And there's nothing really wrong with that.
No.
To just kind of keep on doing whatever. If that brings you joy and makes you happy and you want to do that, do it. But then there's other people that go, I want to make my own stuff. I want to get my own stuff out there. I want to share what's going on inside of me and bring it out into the world. And then we need those people too, because without those people, you don't have the people who want to be the cover band.
Hmm.
They have nothing to cover because no one's creating.
Hmm.
So you need the people out there too that are creators. They gravitate more towards that. You need them creating, and you need the other people out there who want to kind of build upon or repeat or whatever it may be, or put their own spin on what's been already created and established. You need those people out there too, and hopefully they're pursuing it in a genuine way as well, and that it all revolves around making something positive for people.
Yeah.
Because if it's just going to be a bunch of agitprop where you're just putting stuff out there to stir the pot, piss people off, send out a narrative, and play up something for politics or corporations or whatever it is, that's not coming from a place of joy and positivity. That's coming from a place of you're trying to upset people.
Hmm.
And you're going to get that thrown back at you, and sometimes directly thrown back at you from people. But in other ways, universally, I strongly believe in that. You're going to universally get that stuff thrown at you. It's karmic, and so put out stuff that's positive, and do it from a place of positivity. And you're going to get, it might take time, but you're going to get that positivity coming back.
Mm. Yeah. And I think, with the example of, people who do cover music and things like that, and people who do work for maybe the big two and work on a project, uh, like that's why, there is a such thing as a single vision and a collaborative version, because there is something pretty awesome about just being somebody who loves the craft and loves playing a role in a comic book creation. I could be very content just drawing for people who are writing, and I could be very content just writing for people who are drawing, and all the in betweens and stuff. Just being involved in the comic book process, like Peter said, there's nothing wrong actually with having that other approach. But I personally happen to be interested in creating new characters and new stories. So that's why I go that route. But yeah, I don't know. I think that all of that is valid, and something that's cool about collaborative comics too is, as much as there's really awesome single vision comics, and when that works, it really like it has an impact. As much as that is the case, there is I feel like when it comes to comic books as a whole, single vision comics are a very small piece of that. Not many people have done that, and then out of those people who have done that, not many people have stood out. And really, as in the greater scheme of comic books, it's been a collaborative process. Even in a single vision, it can there's a bit of collaboration too, but it's the tradition, the awesome tradition of comic making is collaborative, and it's actually a pretty cool tradition. I think, I like playing a part, even, and again, like I said, the leverage thing. It's like there is something to it. There can be something greater that happens when you do that. So,
Yeah, there's a really fun dynamic to it, and I think there's more cases than not where it turns out great.
hmm
You know, but that's the thing, is that you could crash and burn and do it all on your own, or you can crash and burn and work as a part of a team or a duo or whatever it may be. The one path doesn't guarantee success over the other, and it's so just being mindful of what it is you're looking to accomplish, and that you're really focused on making the best thing possible. Does it mean you're gonna? And when I say that, it doesn't mean you're gonna make the best thing ever. Because what is that? That's so subjective. But it means that whatever you're capable of, you're trying your best to make this great. You're trying your best to do what's right by the story, the character, and trying to entertain people, or maybe even, depending on the story, you're trying to even possibly move them with that story to emotionally make an impact on their life. And you never know. You got to just create, because there's people out there that they create and create and create, and feel like, oh, nothing is sticking, nothing's resonating, and then 10 years goes by and they create something, and all of a sudden that resonates.
hmm
They created like 100 other things over those 10 years, but now this one thing, this one character, this one story, whatever it may be, it just takes off,
hmm
and people love it. It speaks to them. Everything about it, right place, right time, etc. And people will look at you and think that you're like an overnight success, because now everyone just hearing about you, and you're just going like, I've been here for like how many years doing, but you had to get there. You had to do like even King Cryptid. I have no idea how it's gonna go. I'm glad people are enjoying it. I'm certainly having fun making it, but I couldn't have made King Cryptid 10 years ago. I couldn't have made King Cryptid 5 years ago.
hmm
I'm making it exactly the moment in time when it was possible for me to do it in the way that I want to do it. And that's it. And we all get to where we're going to be, wherever that is. But, the only thing I could say is that you're going to get there a lot faster if you just start. So many people just don't start. They keep pushing it off. They come up
hmm
with 1,000 excuses of why not to start. Starting doesn't mean you got to be great off the bat. Starting doesn't mean you got to be a success. Starting doesn't mean that you got to even know what the hell you're doing. Starting just means that you're just going, you know what? Today's the day. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to make an effort. And then the next day, you make another effort. And the next day, another effort. You build upon it, and you keep doing that. Because if you never start, if you never take that time, you're never going to get anywhere with it. And
hmm
I can't tell you how many people I talk to, even myself, there's things that I regret not starting them sooner. I think
hmm
we all regret certain things in life that we didn't start sooner. But it's cliche, but there's no day like today. Just, you don't have to have a huge investment, you don't have to have a ton of skill, you don't even need to know what you're doing. Just start doing something.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you think about that kind of thing, and it's you know, it I don't know, I think about like Michael Jackson or something, and it's like that dude, like he started when he was a child, and that wasn't like, I don't even know if he had much control over that, but you don't get to like Thriller, from day one. He built
Yeah.
upon one little success after another, and there's some funny moments in between where he's, is he with Jackson 5 or is he doing his own thing, and he wasn't as big at that point as he was when he came out with that Thriller album. It was over. you
Well,
know.
it's like that for so many. I mean, we've mentioned, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
hmm
Those guys were doing things in comics for like 20 to 30 something years
hmm
before Fantastic Four comes out.
hmm
Even on a smaller level, Detective Comics, you don't get until number 27, until Batman shows up.
hmm
So they needed 26 issues on that series before they introduced Batman, essentially. So it takes a lot of time to get some different ideas out there. And even that, you could talk about Batman comes on the scene and he's nothing close to even really what
what
people
he
would consider
becomes.
to be the icon that the character is. A lot of people had to come in there and build upon a solid foundation. It's like that with so many things, and it's just like that in life too. But when it comes to creating, is as long as you're going out there and you're doing it in a genuine way, and you're being mindful of it and receptive to people also when you're putting it out there as a creation for people to purchase, enjoy, put their time, their money into, and as long as you're mindful of that, that's how that's occurring, and that there's going to be a conversation with those people too. Look forward to that. That's a fun part. It's
Hmm.
fun to get people that are even, when they're sometimes maybe even confused or not sure why'd you do that? Why'd you write the story like that? Why how come that happened in that scene? Why didn't you do it that way? They're engaged. That's great. So that's not a negative. The negative when you create something is silence.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. When you create something, you put it out there and no one gives a crap. No one talks about it. No one asks you a question about it. It just is like, am I a living ghost? You start questioning your existence. That's the
But
worst thing as a creator.
but if you haven't started, like, you gotta experience that too. I mean,
Exactly.
I've made stuff and it's gone out to the crickets, and a lot of stuff I've made is like that. And but that's also a lesson. The thing is like every one of these things is another rung in the ladder and it's another lesson. What I
Exactly.
learned by doing that and seeing crickets is, oh, just because I make something, it doesn't mean that it deserves to get any attention. I have to work at getting the attention, and not only that, I have to make something that makes people interested. I have to work on my skills. So there's a lot of lessons in every single mistake, but you won't learn any lessons if you don't start.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
um, What Geeks Do Network says, I've started 2 issues written in script format. I've also written things for others in the past. That's
That's great.
freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And
Keep it
like you
up.
said, you need to find an artist. Another tip, I would say, by the way, if you're looking for an artist, like there's tons of artists out there. Like I would start. First of all, obviously, like Google, like that's the answer to everything, google.com. But another way is like go to like Instagram and look up hashtags of making comics or drawing comics or, anything like that.
Mm,
And you'll
yeah.
start to come across some people. And, you know, the thing that to me, this particular thing isn't so much a problem because I do a YouTube channel and I'm involved in a community, a big community, and I know a lot of artists. I've worked with a lot of artists, with a lot of creators, and they're my friends. They're just my friends. They're not. We haven't worked as a creative collaboration necessarily, but they're just my friends. And if I sit down, I could think about, okay, I actually have like 10 people. Maybe I could be like, which person would make the most sense for this, and then I could approach them, propose something. They may or may not be interested. I don't know, but I'm not all
You
I'm
should be
saying.
an agent and take some cut of that.
There you go. But all I'm saying is like it's get involved in a community. There's a lot of like
Yeah.
discords and stuff like that, and you want to get to talking to people because if I were like if I were a person who wasn't involved in a community right now and I was looking for an artist, um I would feel very nervous about saying, "Hey, this is my script and now I'm going to give you some money just because I saw you did some cool comic pages." Like, you have to strike up a relationship a little bit as well. So, I think community's a big part of it. Get to know some people. And then you'll start to realize like what's good and what's not. And I have another tip too that's interesting. If you have any drawing chops at all, maybe try to make like a short comic, because when you've done all the processes, when you've drawn a comic, even if it's just a one page, or maybe even like a comic strip or something. If you've drawn a comic, if you've lettered, if you've done all the like little steps, you'll be able to know if you can trust an artist a little bit more because you have some experience and you know what it takes, at least to a certain level, and that'll give you a little more confidence as well, to hire an artist when you do come across one.
Yeah, you'll also know how to communicate with them
Hmm.
when something needs to maybe be revised or whatever. You're even able to understand if certain things are capable of that's. And what I mean by that is understanding that that is a thing that can occur. The revision that you're asking is possible. A lot of the times, there's people that have no idea what the hell goes into making a comic, what the reality of any of it is on the production level, and they'll want 5 pages redrawn overnight, thinking it's just as simple as that. And not like, well, here's a breakdown, here is, what needs to be tweaked, here's this. It might be the smallest changes, but they can't quantify and explain them. So they just are telling you to redraw them. When meanwhile, they only wanted maybe this character on that side of the panel, or this character to be positioned that way, or, something that could have been done and easily changed. And instead it's a redraw. There's a whole difference. So you end up learning more of how to even communicate with people too, when you're aware of what goes into the process. Because there's nothing like working with someone who has no idea whatsoever, and it just becomes a weird, agitated situation. So yeah, becoming more educated with any field you want to get into is always great. And people, I find a lot of people are rushing nowadays into everything. I think it's just a symptom of the world we live in, the instant gratification kind of world. And
Yeah.
so, as far as this stuff goes, don't necessarily rush into it. Don't take your sweet time about it. But there's no need to rush into it, and you don't have to necessarily approach it in a way where you're feeling like, if I don't hit this point in my life doing this X thing, and whatever it might be, and then I'm a failure or this or that. Take time learning, enjoy your time learning. Spend time understanding various things, and you learn more about yourself too, which is
That's for
great.
sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Red says, I'm afraid of companies because sometimes when I want to sell my work to the companies, all I think is, are they going to destroy my work or sugarcoat the hell out of it? I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Well, that's
Yeah.
another part of also educating and familiarizing yourself with the business you want to be involved in.
Mm.
So what Marsh was talking about too, when you look up hashtags and whatnot, and you get to know people, and you try to establish some semblance of a relationship before you enter into wanting to work with this individual on something that might mean the world to you. You begin to see, oh, that person don't look like my kind of person, and then you avoid wanting to work with them. Or then this other person seems like, oh yeah, they'd be my kind of person, and then as time goes on, you see like, I don't know if that would be my kind of person. And it's okay to be friends with these people, be friendly with people, of course, but there's a difference between having that proper working relationship that you need to establish, and the same thing goes with companies as well. There's certain companies that you're going to be more familiar with, that you're able to say, yeah, they've done right by all these other things, so they would do right by me too. But then there's other companies you look at and go, man, they butcher the hell out of this stuff, and it's just nightmare after nightmare of people being like, run away. It's kind of like that Billy Madison scene when he talks about high school, and the kid's like, I can't wait to go to high school, and he's like, don't you say that. Don't you ever say that. Stay here, and that's a lot of indie creators. They take people who want to be like, I can't wait to work for a company, and indie creators are like, don't ever say that. Continue to work for yourself, because there are unfortunately a lot of bad companies out there, especially some of the bigger ones too. But then there's also some good ones. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know they exist, and they're out there, and they'll do right by you. but again, you got to familiarize yourself. Don't use I'm ignorant to this and that, and I'm new and whatever. Don't end up making that an excuse for you when it comes to certain things like that. So do your due diligence. Look into people, and nowadays, man, the internet has muddied the waters. Because if you look me up, I'm the worst person ever on the face of the earth to some people, and then to others, I'm the best. And it's a weird time to be doing anything. But and there's definitely a batch of people within comics where you might think, wow, it's a lot of nonsense. And then there's a lot of other people that they're great and they're fantastic, and there might even be a lot of nonsense spoken about them, but there's not a lot of nonsense coming from them. So it's all over the place. You have to do your research. You gotta be informed, and take some time, look into people, see what they're about, have a conversation even with them, see what they're about, and move on from there.
And you can also test the waters. My buddy, he's known as Lucifer Storm. I call him Fue because that's his real name.
Oh yeah.
And he hires artists, and the first thing he'll do is he'll ask them to do like a pinup or maybe a short story or something like that, even if it's like 3, 4, 5 pages or something. Test the waters. Like if you have your baby that you want to hand over to people, don't hand over the baby. Hand over something smaller, like maybe a little side story or something that if they screw up, then you'll be okay. Because right here we got what Geeks Do Network had one artist draw 10 pages, but he got flaky and disappeared. He also helped with character design, but all the ideas are mine to use. So yeah, it's worth it to test the waters. Unfortunately, some things you can't know. You don't know that the guy's going to flake out after 10 pages.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess that's what contracts can help with, to a certain extent. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, some situations you can't anticipate them until you're in them. And you can't anticipate every possible outcome. You could try, you'll drive yourself nuts. But it doesn't help to go in blind. So try to do as much research as you can, and then even if you go, okay, well, there's some conflicting stuff, and this person still seems to be okay to me, have a conversation directly, and be honest about it. I don't think you can go wrong approaching most, if not all, situations in a genuine way. And the same thing goes too when you're talking and selling your comic, sharing it, promoting it. There's people who will promote and sell and go, "This is the best comic ever made." Bullshit. And it smells like bullshit, sounds like bullshit, it looks like bullshit. Don't do that. Just talk about what your comic is. You don't have to hype it up in a nonsensical, stupid way. That insults the intelligence of people. It's one thing to jokingly say that, but when people unironically go, and I've gotten pitches like that as a publisher. This is going to be the best comic you ever publish. This is going to be a comic that makes millions of dollars and is going to be groundbreaking. I'm turned off right away from that. Tell me what your comic's about. Tell me what the story's about. Let me know what the character's about. Don't tell me bullshit. If it's going to be great, if people are going to love it, we'll see. But tell me what it's about.
Yeah, for sure. I can't imagine all the stuff you've probably seen as a publisher.
It's crazy, man. And that'll be the whole pitch sometimes. This is the greatest comic you'll ever publish. That'll be the whole description.
And I can relate even with that though, because there was a time when I was younger and maybe more in the teenage or maybe early 20s realm where I thought my stuff didn't stink either, and at that point it stunk more than it's ever stank so far.
Yeah.
And it's like I just know where that's coming from, and I'm like, yeah. And when you see it and hear it, you're like, well, that you already know, like, this is going to be some of the worst stuff I've seen.
It always is. It always is, because these are people that if you had experience and perspective, you
Hmm.
wouldn't behave that way.
Yeah.
So you don't have any of that. So you're not confident. What it is, it's an air of confidence, and it's fake. And so
Hmm.
you're being fake about it, and all you got to go on is hype and hoping that someone buys your bullshit, and
Hmm.
that they're essentially stupid enough to do so. So you're getting off on the wrong foot all over the place, you know. But instead, if you're just going to be genuine about it and be honest about what it is you're making, why you're making it, what it means to you, you know, what's involved, that's what speaks to people.
Hmm.
It's not like this kind of stuff isn't some kind of easy button involved, or is it as complicated as a lot of people think it is. It's just about approaching a situation with sincerity, and yeah, it just don't insult the person that you're trying to talk to about this, because they're smarter than you think. You know, if you just
Yeah.
come along and you're again, if you want to joke around, that's fine. Joking around, everyone loves joking around. But when you're gonna seriously go into it and be like, let me tell you, it's the best comic ever made. You're gonna love it. It's just the greatest thing ever. All puts all the other comics to shame. Kirby, you know, Miller, whatever. Who cares about those guys? This is the greatest thing in the world. Way better than anything they ever done.
Hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because it can go the opposite way as well, where you almost are like, talking crap about your own stuff, and you see like, Peter came on here, he was talking about, King Cryptid and stuff, and he's like, and every story's great, things like that, and it's like, but that's a different thing. That's not saying like this is better than Batman, this is it's just saying I really like what I did, and I have the confidence to let you guys know, like, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, some people are gonna love it. Some people, it's not gonna speak to them. You know, some people right off, you know, the bat are gonna be like, "King Cryptid, what's that? I like cryptids." And other people are gonna be like, "What the hell's a cryptid?"
Hmm.
You know, so it's all over the place.
Yeah.
But it begins and usually ends with how sincerely you approach it, and if you come into it just wanting to hype the hell out of it and not discussing anything more than some, it's not even superficial at that level. It's just pompous bullshit. If that's all you want to talk about in regards to what you're creating, then it makes me question: do you even know what you're creating? Because if you can't even really talk about it in any kind of genuine way, it makes me think, well, if I get my hands on it and I read that, I'm gonna be like, wow, that's why they just said what they said, because they don't know what the hell this is even about.
Hmm. And that's a possibility because people are, young writers. I'm still a young writer, and like you might not have, progressed in your skills to the point where you even do actually know what your story is about. You know a lot of details, you want to have like this cool part and that cool part, but you might not actually have a
Yeah, to
clear
make it,
idea.
yeah, this
And
cohesive thing.
mhm. And if you don't have that clear idea, or if you can't explain it to somebody, that might be a sign that it's like, let's go and work on it some more. Maybe get some help with somebody to help me write it, because you got to be humble. Like, you can't let your if you let your ego get in the way, you're just going to get into a lot of trouble. So you got to do your best to just say, I think, Peter said it the best earlier on today when he said, what's best for the story, what's best for the reader, what's best for the comic. Those kind of questions will help you to be a little more objective about your own work, and understand what you need to do to level up, to make the thing good.
Yeah.
I do want to shout out What Geeks Do Network. Thank you for the extra cashola, and you guys are great. Keep it up. Thank you. I really, and I appreciate your comments and questions as well. Um, and we got Red with one more question. I have to ask: do you prefer black and white comic or colored comics? Um,
Uh,
yeah,
for
go
me,
ahead, Peter.
it really depends on the story being told. So in King
Mm,
Cryptid, most of the issues are in color, but then
mhm,
there's a couple issues that are in black and white, and issue two being one of them. So issue two is actually completely black and white, even in regards to the covers.
mhm.
And so here's the black and white art, and this is Nick Hunter, and
Yes.
Nick does tremendous work.
Mhm.
His line work is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I came across Nick when he had sent in a submission to It Came Out on a Wednesday, and I immediately loved his art. And I thought, man, if he is available, I'd love to have him work on an issue of King Cryptid. So when I approached him about that, I wanted him to specifically keep it, even though he does great work that can get colored as well, and we'll have that on issue five. Christian Rossi's coloring his work on issue five, but on issue two, complete black and white. And I had the story already set for that. That was going to take place on the night of a new moon in a cave that was only being lit by one light source. So it really made next to no sense to have color on it anyway. It wouldn't really add anything. If anything, it would detract from how harsh and blinding that light source in the cave is supposed to be. Because it could be an image in color or just in real life. But if you've got a really bright light on something, it just looks like white, but you could
Mhm,
be completely in full color.
mhm.
So it's the same thing going on within that issue. And the issue has a little bit more of like a tone that plays on the use of light and shadow. So for black and white, I really loved it. But if it wasn't that kind of an issue, I would have wanted it in color. So one, three, and four are in color. But it really depends on the tone of the story and how the story is being conveyed. Sometimes people like to have flashback kind of stories, maybe in a black and white or a sepia or that kind of thing. It's a little cliched, but it works. It's effective. And then other times, too, people will go for horror with black and white. The reason that kind of started was because it helped skirt around certain rules in publishing where if it was in black and white, it wasn't gory necessarily. The color of red and all the other kinds of colors weren't really there. Publishing got some weird history, especially comic publishing.
Yes.
But so a comic like The Walking Dead, black and white, grayscale, that kind of a thing, really became popular because it set a certain tone. It might even remind people of the black and white, Night of the Living Dead kind of a thing. Same thing with movies too, black and white for the same thing. It kind of scales down the effectiveness of a harsher rating if it were to be in color. But it to me it depends on the tone of the story. But I love both. I love both a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, I do too. And there's not much more I could add. You really said a lot, but one thing I will say is sometimes certain artists, their art just kind of almost seems to sing more, whether in black and white or it sings more with color. Like you talk about Christian Rossi, he's somebody who I I almost want to say it's better in black and white with his work, but
He's
if
tough because
he's
it's great.
coloring, it depends on who. Like if somebody else were to color him, I don't know if it would look good, but he also knows what he's doing with the colors with that
Yeah,
kind of style, and it works pretty darn awesome.
exactly. Yeah, that's the thing too, is that a lot of the time in color, you can really ruin
Mm,
tremendous line work. When you get line work that's like this, like on issue two, if someone were to color that, you would not want to have tons of gradients all over the place, get crazy with effects and whatever. You'd want to stick to something that was relatively flatter kind of color system. And Christian does that beautifully
mhm,
over Keir Covington's work. Keir
yeah.
he's got great line work, and Christian colored that perfectly.
Mhm,
So, various parts of it, it's not just muddied up, and that could happen. And it does happen a lot of the time with certain comics where colorists will come in there and get more painterly with it, and they're talented and they're great, but they're not working effectively with the line work.
mhm,
So if it's strong line work, you want to scale back on how painterly you get with the colors. You want to let the line work sing, do its job. If it's very weak line work, almost like pencils, then you can get a little more painterly with it. Then you can get a little bit more complicated with the coloring. But it really does depend on the kind of comic again. And yeah, I've seen a lot of comics get ruined with the
Hmm.
coloring because the line
Yeah.
work was awesome, and the colorist kind of comes in and maybe doesn't know how to treat that line work, and they bury the line, they bury the lighting. It's all
Hmm.
over the place, and the effects are all over the place. Especially there's a lot of like mid '90s
Hmm.
comics, right? When they were just getting used to digital coloring, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
oh my lord, it is tough.
Yeah.
You just think like, why can't you guys just do what you did, but digitally? Don't
Yeah.
go crazy with the airbrush and all that other nonsense.
And plus,
Um,
I feel like comic books, in and of itself, like the medium, it just works really well, even with just flat colors. Like, like
yeah,
so for so long, that's all you really had most of the time was pretty much flat colors, and it was great.
yeah, it really pops. And unless you're talking about a full, complete digital process, where like someone like what is that, Art Germ, where it just kind of almost looks like AI art,
Hmm.
and it just looks like this, like a computer made it, kind of
Hmm.
a thing. When you've got like and obviously his is like a digital painting, but if you've got that built up, it's different than when you've got a more traditional comic art style with the line work and the colors that should take almost like not a back seat, but be complementary to understanding that that line work is there. It's what's crafting the shape. It's what's making everything else pop. So if you
Hmm.
bury that, because I've seen people too, colorists come in and they'll bury the line work so bad that like even the darker shaded parts, like the blacks, are like a color now. And the whole thing just turns into just a mess, and you're like, what? And then you see the inks and you're like, what did you do? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Like all you had to do was a relatively simple 2 or 3 tone color system,
Hmm.
and you would have had an easier time and a better product. And instead, like, they get in there, they get so complicated with it, and then it's completely, the colors completely take over. You lose the art, you lose the line of the artists underneath it. And it's the same thing happened with inks too. When an inker is not good for the penciler, and they go in there and it looks like you couldn't even, it could be Jim Lee doing pencils, and you're like, he did those. So you could have an inker that comes in and screws it all up to high hell.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that can happen with colorists nowadays. Inkers, unfortunately, aren't as big of a deal. I wish that they really were with comics, but it's that computerized coloring that's kind of taken over and does so much of the heavy lifting,
Hmm.
and you lose a lot of that pop that
Hmm.
comic art really had. It made it so great.
Yeah. And that's not to say there isn't some beautiful stuff going on with color. Like I'm actually super impressed. Like by some comics, like the colorist, like okay, so from the tradition that I think Peter and I come from, the bat, more a little bit earlier, 90s, 80s, that type of thing. You know, you had the penciler, the inker, or sometimes it would say finisher, things like that, and colorist was in the credits too, but nobody really thought color separator, like whatever, like nobody really thought about the colorist that much. I mean, they're still very important, and actually, some of the artists ended up coloring their own stuff, um, or at least choosing the colors. I don't really understand how the process went back then, um, but nowadays, a colorist can actually be a vital part of the storytelling. They actually can almost change the storytelling.
Oh yeah, they
Um,
do a lot of the heavy lifting nowadays.
yeah, and it can be very beautiful work as well. And so I'm actually really, I think that's really cool. But that's not me. And most of my comics, I'm gonna probably stick with a relatively limited palette, a limited approach with color because I'm not that artist, and I don't know how to bring that storytelling with color, the way they do, so or I would hire somebody if I felt like that was needed for the story.
Yeah, yeah, and there's tremendously talented colorists out there right now. If anything, um, there's so many that are so talented that they're relying too much on them
Mm-hmm.
in modern, at least mainstream comics.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the indie stuff too that I see that that there's great coloring that goes on, but it really does depend, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen enough to take note where you'll see the colorists come in and they will they're not they're not pushing back enough to let the art breathe, the storytelling breathe, to offset even things too. Sometimes the colorist needs to know when to understand to highlight the mood of a scene with
Oh
color,
yeah.
as opposed to going straight for constant realism. So what I mean is that sometimes, and you'll see it all the time in comics, but sometimes someone is all in red and it
Mm-hmm.
points out a mood, or there's blue for the backgrounds, very light blues, and the main foreground characters are completely colored and correct. Or there's a certain lighting that you think that wouldn't be possible, but it would be done because it pops the image.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time that the colorist understands that it has to be the storytelling as well. But if everything is like just constant, like this cover for instance, you got the red background. It
Mm-hmm.
points out the mood and the tone of the emotion of the scene. This
Danger.
big swamp creature emerging, and King Cryptid's like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
But if that was just done realistically as a swamp, it's just like all the little swamp things in the background and the whatever the sky would be like bluish or
Mm-hmm.
grayish, or it's not the same impact of that scene.
Yeah,
So the
there'd be a lot
colorist
of
has to,
greenery, and that doesn't say
yeah,
danger like red does.
exactly. So the colorist has to understand when to play up that color pattern as well, and that's all kind of like color theory stuff, but it's also understanding to highlight mood and emotion, and part of that also comes from directing what needs to be done as well. So what we were talking about even earlier with getting experience, gaining perspective, learning about the craft, even going back, learn about and really study the stuff that you love. If there's certain comics that you're like, this comic, it's great. I love everything about it. Well, really dissect what it is that you love about it. What
Mm-hmm.
about the writing do you love? What about the lettering do you love? The flow of the panel placement? What about the writing, working with the art? What about the coloring? What about the inking? Everything about it. Analyze it, study it. Become a student of the craft and not just like a passing observer and then going into making what it is you
Mm-hmm.
want to make. Really nail it, explain it, quantify it. And it'll help you to also then, when something happens within the context of creating, you're able to understand it and approach it and have a more knowledgeable frame of reference as opposed to just taking a shot in the wind and going, it looks bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you mean it looks bad? It just does. You got to be able to quantify it and tell people specifically why that works and why that doesn't work. I mean, hell, I know editors that can't do that, man. I know people that call themselves editors anyway, that they can't tell you why something works or it doesn't work. You
That's
know,
like your job if
yeah,
you're an
and
editor.
and and they might know when it looks good or it looks bad, but they can't explain why it's bad or it's good or what you should do here to make it better or how it needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
That's You shouldn't call yourself an editor.
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn more. You got to be able to understand it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And like I said, I'm working on this the Con Man comic that I'm making, and I'm gonna be. I did the lettering and I wrote it. I did the lettering. I didn't do the art, and I'm trying to do the coloring. We'll see if I come out with something that's satisfying enough. I'll do the coloring, but the first thing I did actually was look for examples, and I looked in King Cryptid. I was like, okay, how does he do it? And I also looked in. It came out on Wednesday, and I was surprised to see, wow, so many of these are black and white. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but even like the issue with the kids in it and stuff, even that, even though that's like a cartoony style and everything, even that was kind of flat colors, and it looks great.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Alex
and
did a great job with that.
yeah, and speaking of getting into King Cryptid, uh, what Geeks Do Network says seeing interiors of King Cryptid. I'm excited to get mine any day. They are on the way. So yeah, and to specifically about that, before we kind of get, start leaving and stuff, I really want to hear a little bit about what can we look forward to in the next few issues, the next 5 issues of King Cryptid story wise. Is there, without spoilers?
Sure, yeah. So
Let us know.
we got issues 5 to 9. So in issue 5, King Cryptid squares off against the White Mountain Yeti, and the White Mountain Yeti has been terrorizing the White Mountains, obviously, of New Hampshire. That's a real place. And that's basically King Cryptid's base of operations, I guess you could say, is the White Mountains of New Hampshire. He sticks in the New England region for now. But there's a ski resort that's being terrorized. A lot of tourists are being terrorized in these White Mountains. It sounds almost like it's a Scooby-Doo plot, but it's not. And the issue opens up. We see the White Mountain Yeti kind of like screaming to the skies with 4 people strewn about in the snow, passed out, and their van is wrecked, and the White Mountain Yeti looks like that he's the culprit. So we see this issue take off and take place within that region, but King Cryptid is it's interesting with King Cryptid because he gets involved in strange ways because he's got a psychic ability with animals and cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
And so he doesn't have that with humans, even though he used to be a human. So 500 or so years ago, he's betrayed and cursed, and then turned into this cryptid, this creature thing. So King Cryptid arrives on the scene, and there's a lot of different things that happen throughout the course of that issue. We learn more about Necro, the New England Cryptid Research Organization. We learn more about what they're doing, their cover-up, how deep that goes. We're introduced to a scientist, a geneticist called Kate Winters. So Dr. Kate Winters comes into play, and she has kind of like a leak, a whistleblower sort of thing to relay to Dr. Erin Carroll. And Dr. Erin Carroll is seen in issue 4 of King Cryptid. She's a cryptozoologist. Used to be a veterinarian, came across basically a family of bears that was slaughtered, absolutely torn to shreds. Not by a bear attack, even though that's the cover-up story. She looked into it. It was cryptids. It definitely was cryptids. Something's weird about the whole thing. And there was one survivor. It was a bear cub, which she adopted. She basically has had that bear cub since, and his name is Orion. And Orion's always by her side. So she's got these other people that are with her, and they do research. They're trying to expose the New England Cryptid Research Organization for being a government cover-up agency. So they're kind of on the trail of certain events, and this is one of the things that they're leading to. So we see them in issue 4. What happens in issue 4 leads them to issue 5. In issue 6, we've got the Dragon Vanderkin, and the Dragon Vanderkin is named specifically because there's a certain character within the series, which I won't give away because that would be kind of a spoiler, where this character, the dragon, is a humanoid dragon. It's like a were-dragon, so it can transform. The specific thing that takes place in that issue is and King Cryptid takes place in our world. So we have the White Mountains. We have also this landmark called the Old Man of the Mountain. And the Old Man of the Mountain is a real thing. It's in Franconia, New Hampshire. It used to have the very surprising profile of a man's face, and I mean, you being in Connecticut, you know what these things look like. It's all over the place in New Hampshire, and it fell off a while ago, maybe 15 or so years ago. The face, so we kind of explain. It's like a little historical fiction. We kind of explain what happened and why the face fell. But King Cryptid battles this dragon, who's decided to make a home out of the Old Man of the Mountain. And the Old Man of the Mountain is King Cryptid's mentor. That thing's about 12,000 years old, and King Cryptid's about 500 or so years old. And anytime King Cryptid feels like he's caught in a moment of like an existential crisis especially, he gets in there and he talks to the Old Man. The Old Man gives him advice and whatnot. So he's at a moment again, at a crossroads, because he's feeling like there's weird stuff occurring. So he wants to go visit his old friend and finds that there's this dragon terrorizing the area, has taken 3 people hostage up on top, and their captors on top of the Old Man of the Mountain. So King Cryptid's got to fight this dragon. Dragon's huge, though. Dragon's like 16 feet tall, and King Cryptid's 7 feet tall. So King Cryptid needs some help. So we'll see who he needs help from. Issue 7, we go back. We start off in Dogtown Village in Massachusetts in the early 1800s. We see a couple that's fleeing. Wendy and William are fleeing the scene. Angry villagers are chasing them. And there's a curse that gets that is exacted upon both of them, and that curse basically turns them into werewolves. But they have a peculiar kind of circumstance to that curse where they actually can't be human at the same time, nor can they be wolves at the same time. So when one is a wolf, the other is a human. When one is a human, the other is a wolf, and they're immortal. So they're cursed to kind of spend their days together forever, but also apart. So we go fast forward into present day, Jackson, New Hampshire, and there's been a werewolf terrorizing the village. So King Cryptid he is enlisted by William, and there's a reason for it that we touch upon within that issue, but I don't want to spoil it. Victor Lugo, who's a cryptid bounty hunter, makes his return. We saw him in issue 1. We see him again in issue 7. And he's hunting down this werewolf with a new team of mercs. There's a couple things that are fun that take place in issue 7 that hint upon stuff to happen in the future. But I don't want to spoil those again. We see Victor Lugo be particularly vicious to even his own men in this specific issue. The first issue we saw him, he's kind of just more doing his job. But there's stuff that happens in issue 1 that at this point when we see him, he's a little bit more pissed off. He takes things. He's taken things very personal in terms of his job now, hunting down cryptids for the New England Cryptid Research Organization, which is a cover that's a cover of a cover. So there's a lot of layers to Necro. Issue 8 is a flashback issue, goes back to 87, ties into issue 3. So we go and we see those kids again that you were talking about with issue 3. This is on Halloween night, 1987. And something happens on that night, especially to one of them, that changes all of their lives forever. And we see them later on as adults. They're a very important part of the story, especially as adults. But there's stuff that happens. I won't say more other than the fact that Zeta Reticulans take place. That we see them in the issue. Those are gray aliens. So nice. Yeah, we've got gray aliens in King Cryptid as well. So we've got the Behemoth, which is like a Mothman hybrid of a human being. We've got the Granite Beast. We've got Broog the Swamp Monster. We've got the White Mountain Yeti. We've got werewolves. We've got dragons. We've got gray aliens. And then issue 9, we've got Puckwudgies. And Puckwudgies are from Wampanoag folklore. They're like these little shapeshiftery. They play tricks on people, but sometimes they play deadly tricks. And these guys used to be friendly with humans, but humans betrayed them along the way, and now they don't care if they kill them with some of their tricks. They're mischievous, and they're trying to impress their father. And who their father is, we find out in issue 9. They capture King Cryptid, and they want to offer him up to their father, who King Cryptid has at one point in time really apparently pissed off. So we figure out who that is. King Cryptid is injured. They take him back to where their base is, where their home is. And King Cryptid has to figure out a way to get the hell out of there because he's outnumbered and he's kind of overpowered because the powers of the Puckwudgie, they distort and shift reality itself. So in this version of it, they're not necessarily like changing their own form. They're changing the ability of the person that's seeing them. They're changing their perception of reality. So King Cryptid, again, he's got psychic powers as well, but they're getting really messed with because of the field being generated by these Puckwudgies. So there's all kinds of stuff, but that issue in particular, that's when he really understands just how horrible Necro is and what's been going on. There's something that specifically hits him hard, and it's happening to kids, and it strikes a nerve in him. And we learn later on why kids mean so much to King Cryptid, but it really hits him hard, and at that point he's convinced there's something purposeful being done, something horrible being done, and he really has to try as much as he can to stop it.
That sounds like some interesting stuff. For sure.
Yeah. So we got a lot of stuff going on in the series, and then, like I said, next year we've got even more.
Wow. So the plot continues to thicken.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking about like the thing with the New Hampshire mountain, the old man and stuff. We have not too far from where I live. We have a mountain called the Sleeping Giant, and for similar reasons, it kind of I guess looks like a sleeping giant. What mountain kind of doesn't really, but I don't really know what the story is about it. But hey, it's in New England. Maybe it could be part somewhere in your story.
Yeah. And I've got an issue map also on kingcryptid.com and on the Alterna site where you can see certain issues and where they're taking place throughout New England. And eventually we get outside New England. I can't make a cryptid paranormal series that doesn't start taking place across the world, not just across the U.S. And then there's even going to be issues. Of course, I brought up the gray aliens and things like that. There's going to be issues as well that we go off the planet. So
Nice.
yeah, so this series, like I said, is everything about the paranormal stuff, comics, horror, sci-fi, adventure. There's a lot of mystery in the series as well. There's a lot of dramatic irony too, because sometimes the reader knows things that King Cryptid or some of the other characters don't know. And then I love the aspect, like next year I'm going to have Christian Rossi back drawing an issue where the Behemoth is back. So we're going to catch up on what the Behemoth's been doing, because he's been trying to figure out what the hell he is, where he came from, what is his purpose. And so he's kind of on friendly terms with King Cryptid, but at the same time, it's one of those, like, you don't want to necessarily get in his way when he's trying to figure out what's going on, because the character is more prone. He's kind of more animal-like, more instinctual, and he will clash. Even though they're not enemies necessarily, he will clash with King Cryptid. So I can't wait till we get to that. That's next year, though.
All right. Sounds good. Can't wait to keep reading more. And everybody who's watching now, I did put the link for the second time and to get some more King Cryptid. I put that in the chat, and it's also in the description, whether you're watching now or watching later. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat and asking questions and all that, and also the people who are watching after the fact. Thank you for watching. I hope you go and check out what Peter's doing over there at Alterna Comics and all the rest of the creators, and also obviously for King Cryptid, because I don't know, to me, I'm still excited about this newsprint comic thing and what you've been doing, man. So man,
Thank you, man.
keep up the good work for sure. And
yeah, that's the thing
many
too.
years to come.
real quick for people that
for
don't
sure.
know. Well, okay, so each issue of King Cryptid's like $1.99 or $2.25, depending on which issues you're reading. But these are also on newsprint, like Marsh said. So anyone that might have been confused and thought, "Oh wow, is that possible on newsprint?" It's absolutely possible. So the cover is kind of like a glossy silk coated cover sort of thing, and then the interiors are on newsprint. And there's no glare or anything like that, and they come out looking great.
Yeah, I love it. Cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming on, Peter, for the 5th time. And as you know, you're always
a pleasure,
welcome.
man.
Absolutely. So, yeah, everybody, thank you once again. We got one last question. Pete, quick question. Have you ever read Whitley Strieber?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Whitley made that book Communion, and it was turned into like a goofy as hell movie with Christopher Walken.
Oh, I saw that recently. I didn't. Wow, that was a very weird.
Yeah, Christopher Walken in that movie is nothing like Whitley in real life, and they didn't have a disco dance party with up there. That's not but
as bad as that was, for some reason I enjoyed it.
It's an entertaining movie, but man,
It was horrible. It was so weird.
Yeah, it really it's very weird, but yeah, he's got a lot of strange, not just books and accounts of various things and talking about extraterrestrials and whatnot too, but he's got a lot of personal stories like getting raided by government
Oh,
agencies
jeez.
and a lot of crazy stuff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the answer is yes. All right. Cool. So again, thank you everybody. Thank you, Peter, and we're gonna sign out here. Hope you guys have a wonderful night and a wonderful Sunday and next week, and we will be talking to you next time. Cool.